Thank you, Jan, and thank you very much. And thank you all for coming, and thank you to the City of Ottawa for inviting me. It's good to see old friends, and great to come home. I went to school here and spent 12 years living in Ottawa, so I know it's a great city. I also know how Ottawans have a great affinity for Toronto. So, one of our national pastimes. We love to hate the banks, we love to hate Toronto, but it's okay. I understand that. So I'm going to start this. Just want to make sure in fact, when you think about what we've done, I've got 30 minutes to explain what we've done in the last 13 years, so it's going to be rather quick. But I'm going to focus on some of the hows, because I think that's really important. When you're talking about urban renewal, it's really important to think about how you do things. The Toronto formula may not work here, and probably every city has to have its own formula, its own unique requirements and so forth. But some of the hows that we did are important to learn from, because it is a great opportunity for you to look at the waterfront, for example, and you get one shot at it for a century or so. So you better do it right. I'm going to talk a bit about the context of the project, how we did things, what we've done, the economic impacts, then finish off with the future of what's happening. So this is one of the largest projects in North America, certainly maybe even the world. It's a huge project. It's 2,000 acres right next to the central business district of what is effectively the economic capital of Canada. Not the political capital, obviously, but the economic capital. It's land, 2,000 acres, land for about 40,000 residential units, so it's about 100,000 people, 10 million square feet of commercial space, plus parks, recreation, entertainment, retail, and so forth. So it's a very large project. It's estimated to be about $35 billion in today's dollars, of which $6 to $8 billion is the public sector investment, and the rest, of course, is private sector for apartments and office buildings, hotels, and the like. And it's probably, we've been at it 13 years, it's probably another 20 or 30 years, depending on the marketplace, to see it through. So it's a long-term project that's going to take a lot of perseverance to get done. And even Torontonians don't appreciate the scale of this. So we do some bubble maps just to show people what the scale is. So that first bubble represents the area of Battery Park in New York City, 97 acres. And then you've got Canary Wharf, 297 acres, and Waterfront Toronto, 2,000 acres. So this is a major project. It's going to take a long time to do, decades, but we're on the right path. So a lot of challenges, and Jan talked briefly about some of those. We have huge public cynicism. There's been studies on Toronto's waterfront for 200 years. The first ones were done by Lieutenant Governor Simcoe in the mid-1790s, and not a lot of action. So obviously when we started 13 years ago, it was, oh yeah, more studies, more consultants, and nothing's going to happen. So a lot of public cynicism to overcome, and that affected our strategy of development. Stop and start. We had a few, I'll call it false starts in the mid-'80s at Harbourfront that really turned people off, I think, to a large part. Very complex projects. Everything south of Front Street is fill. The harbour's been moved out over the last 100 years, so it's all fill. So there's no bearing capacity. You put a light pole in, you got to go down 35 feet to rock. The water table's at 4 feet, and contaminants, you name it, we got it. You name any one, I'm sure I can find it for you down there somewhere, because no one tracked what they put in there. So we've got coal tar, we've got arsenic, we've got, you name it, it's there. So very challenging from that perspective as well. And global competition. We know that most cities are doing the same thing we're doing, which is really trying to attract talent and capital. And if you're not moving ahead in this area, you're getting behind. I mean, the war for talent is there. As people my age move out of the workforce, young people are very mobile, capital's mobile, so you really want to be ensuring that your city is attracting its fair share of talent. And of course, limited resources. I mean, we have a large contribution from 3 governments, but it's a $35 billion project, so our initial contribution doesn't go all that far. And here's, I think, the most important part. It's about waterfront revitalization, not about real estate development. We're not doing it to peddle real estate on the waterfront. We're doing it really to change the nature of the city. It's about being driven by public policy, stopping urban sprawl, promoting sustainability, design excellence, transit, all those things that create a great quality of life. Because that's what's going to keep people here. That's what's going to attract people to your city, to our city, to the country. And that's what's going to make us competitive globally for the long term. That's what protects our quality of life, is to have these places, this quality of place and quality of life that allows us to keep and retain that talent, because other places doing this as well. Singapore, Melbourne, Sydney, you name it. There's people doing the same thing, and we've got to do our part to make sure we can keep that young talent here, the intellectual capital that we need to survive in the next and thrive in the next century. So the business model really is quite simple. We have a very large contribution from 3 governments. It was a legacy of a failed Olympic bid for the Toronto 2008 Olympics, which didn't occur, as you know. But we've got $1.5 billion of seed capital plus control of land. And there's about 85% ownership in the public of all that land. And the model is to take the seed capital, invest in infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, and so forth, sell the public land, take the profit, reinvest in infrastructure, sell the land, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't get us to $6 to $8 billion of revenue to provide all the infrastructure, but it does change the model, allows us to grow from $1.5 billion up to about $2.3 billion of infrastructure to allow development to occur. And apart from that, then that land that goes out to the development community goes through a competitive tender. So it's again a public asset. So it goes out through a public process. But again, it's not just price. It's not a tender. It's more of a request for proposals, because those are all defined or determined by not only price, but also quality, vision, sustainability, and those kinds of things that the developer brings to the table. And that's really an important aspect of it. One of our roles, we are the master planners for the waterfront. We're not the regulatory authority. That resides with the city. But we are the master planner. So we do the master planning with the community and then take those plans to City Council and through the planning department for approval for zoning changes. And we're basing it on an official plan that's been done many years ago, or probably 10 years ago. So we're not starting from scratch. We have the core concepts of what those areas should be, but we're doing the next layer of planning, which is precinct planning, which then allows us to actually get underway with development. And we do it through a very large consultation process. I'm going to dwell a bit on this because I think this is important given what I've heard from Sheila and others. In the period of 06 to 13, we had over 300 meetings because we had so many projects underway. And what we've done basically is we have, yes, an environmental assessment process, but we've mixed those meetings with other kinds of meetings. So we have public meetings, then we have stakeholder meetings. Stakeholder meetings are meetings with people who we've invited in who represent an organization. It could be a BIA, it could be a residents association, a condominium board, a retail association, a trucking association, depending on what the issues are. And those 12 to 20 people actually work with our planners and have working sessions to help devise those plans. So we go through, and as they work on those plans with our staff and our outside planners, that word goes back through their organizations as to what's going on. So we have a public meeting, a stakeholder meeting, public meeting, stakeholder, public, and on to council. And so it does two things. It gives us great input, and it also helps build consensus throughout the whole process. So when we get to City Council, we don't have deputations about people objecting to the plan. We've got people deputing saying, get out of the way, let these guys get on with the job, because it's their plan as well. The phrase I love to say is we love to do our projects with the community, not to the community. And that requires a lot of patience, a lot of work, but certainly it ends up with better ideas, better results, because the community know the neighborhoods better than anybody else. They know what works, what doesn't work. It doesn't change the plans. It's not sort of the old adage about a racehorse designed by a committee being a camel. It's basically, helping us, create great ideas, great input to the plans to make sure that we're getting better product. I call it crowdsourcing for ideas, and it works well. Quality of place is obviously a key element for us. We've attracted some of the best designers in the world. We won over 60 design awards in the last 13 years. It's more than that now. It's creeping up. But we don't basically restrict our design. We challenge the world for ideas. Some of the things we've done are create international design competitions for big projects. This one here was for the Central Waterfront. It attracted 38 submissions from 17 countries around the world. Now, they have to partner up with a local designer for licensing purposes, but that's fine. But we actually do want to tap into the brain power of the world. You're building a waterfront, you want the best, you get to do it once, do it right. You get the best ideas, no matter where they're from. We also put into place a design review panel, third one in Canada. First was Vancouver, second was your own National Capital Commission, and then we put ours in, and that idea has, I think, rippled out, and many more do that. And that's really helped to crank up the design as well and make sure that people are giving us really, really good designs. It's a bit of a struggle with developers and their architects. I call it a very humbling experience, but it's actually ended up with a better product. And most designers, having been through it, realize their designs have been enhanced by having peer reviews of outside experts. We're also trying to raise the bar for sustainability. That's key, a core value of the corporation. We started off in 2005 by creating what we called a sustainability framework. And that guideline was to really affect how we plan, design, build, operate all the facilities in the waterfront. We started off, requiring LEED Gold. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It becomes the North American model. There's models around the world. There's BREEAM in England. There's Gold Stars in Australia, and there's various ones. But we thought, let's adopt one that basically the market begins to understand. And we established LEED Gold as the requirement for 2005, and have basically ratcheted up since then. Not just going to platinum, but actually being much more specific. One of the challenges we have is how do you plan for today and deal with developers who have to sell their product tomorrow, but also look to the future. So as we've changed our requirements now to sort of move up and doing things like making sure that we have minimum slab to slab heights to make sure that things don't become obsolete. The other thing we've done is make sure that any parking garages have flat floors. Parking garages will be obsolete in 20 years. So let's make sure those structures aren't obsolete. They can be used for other things. So increase the slab to slab height and make sure the floors are flat, put the ramps at the end. And also done things like ensure that developers don't build their buildings using the partition walls as shear walls. In an office building, it's a column and slab construction because the floor plate's going to change. In Toronto, in that marketplace, they use the partition walls as shear walls. And the problem with that, of course, is that a 500 square foot unit today is 500 square feet forever. So we're saying, no, you use other sound producing, reducing materials, but don't use those as structural elements. We make sure that 500 square foot units may sell tomorrow morning, but in 20 years or 30 years' time, does that become a slum? Perhaps. So we're saying, no, make sure that you can actually take some of those walls down, and a person who buys today can buy their neighbor or their other neighbor in future. There's still challenges with electrical chases and mechanical chases, but usually those are more towards the core, and you can open up the units and create flexibility in the residential housing stock so it doesn't get torn down. We also know that in the waterfront we have about 2 million cubic meters of bad soil to take out and 1 million cubic meters to bring back in. And if we just adopted the standard approach of let developers dig and dump, what I call it, just take it up north somewhere and put it in a hole, licensed or not, what's that mean? So we had the Ontario Centres of Excellence do a study for us. We said, what is the impact of that if we just sit back and let people do what they normally do? Well, it means about 50 million kilometers extra truck traffic. And the public cost of that, when you consider congestion, road wear and tear, accidents, fatalities, public health, because we're a single-payer system, it's about $65 million. So, well, we have a broader responsibility. Let's do something different. So we tried washing the soil to reduce the export of bad product, and actually even have somebody else now who can cook the cake and basically reduce it to almost nothing. However, I don't have the wherewithal, or we didn't have the wherewithal to basically subsidize that. So what we did, we ran the pilot program to make sure it was doable. Then we brought a private sector operator in to run the business. And what we did to make sure that he could run the business, we said, we'll guarantee our developers have to take their soil to you as long as it costs no more than dig and dump. So no cost to the developer, no cost to the public, and the right public policy agenda gets achieved. And, we've become really good at those, what I call those workarounds. It's not illegal, just what I mean by that is finding creative ways to use private sector models to achieve public policy without spending public bucks. We know, for example, looking at Stockholm, that transit's a very important part of our sustainability agenda. In Stockholm, when they put in the transit, within 18 months of the first occupants, the modal split went from the 30s to 70% using public transit. In our model in Toronto, transit unfortunately isn't well funded, and you can get transit there after 3 or 4 years and population builds up. The problem then is, of course, patterns have been created. You can't get people out of their cars. So our challenge is to get it there early enough such that people, when they go down there to buy an apartment or get a job down there, that transit's available. Big challenge given the cost of it, but we're still struggling with it. We're also building future-ready infrastructure. We have a flooding issue that we have to manage in Toronto. It has 3 rivers that come in. We had Hurricane Hazel in the 50s that killed about 160 people on the Humber River. We're on the Don River watershed, so we have to design the area such that it could withstand a Hurricane Hazel in the Don River watershed, which is about 300 square miles of watershed, a lot of it hard surfaced rather. So we've had to build flood protection berms to effectively shield downtown from that flood risk, But what we've done is created parks on top. We've used, this is a 17-acre park now that no one knows is really a flood protection barrier, is now a broad city park, well received. Also, some creative infrastructure. We've combined public art, infrastructure, and parks and recreation to create this really looking after stormwater. So the stormwater gets collected in the area, it gets treated with UV, it gets run through the public art up in some big arches, comes down into a biofilter and out into the harbor. And when we don't have rainwater, we use lake water. And it's about 99% pure when it goes out into the harbor. We also, unlike most developments, we're leading with the public realm. And a couple of good reasons for that, if you think about it. You know, it overcomes the public cynicism. We say, no, it's happening this time for sure. Here's the park or the parks. Secondly, we also set a great high design center for our developers to follow. If the developers are building next door and they see a great park, they're going to give us great design as well. And of course, if the business model is to settle the public land, why not add value first? So it helps in all three ways, and it's been successful in all three categories. We also have a challenge in Toronto with street trees. They last an average of 5 to 7 years. No irrigation, hard-packed compaction, and what happens is they get cut off and not replaced. And that's a shame. So what we've adopted is a technology called Silva cells. It's like upside-down patio tables. It's grillage of framework of grills that basically can support paved surfaces. And what it does do is it allows 30 cubic meters of uncompacted soil for every tree. And so those trees should last 50, 60, and 70 years, not 5, 6, or 7. And of the 34,000 trees we have to plant, about 16,000 will have this treatment because they're in paved areas. And that'll give us those generational trees, which are so important to the public realm. Also, we've, looking at waterfronts around the world, and I saw probably a dozen myself personally, and our designers looked at probably 30. One of the things we've learned is to make sure when you have a public edge, a park edge or a water's edge, don't allow residential at grade. Second floor up, no problem, but keep the ground floor, retail, community, educational, whatever. Keep it public. Because what happens is ground floor residential tends to unofficially privatize public space. And it just sucks the life out of a waterfront. And so we've been very, very hard-nosed about that, saying, no, you've got to have retail. Now, there's a limit to how many cafes you can have in a kilometer waterfront, but you can have the condos community area, you can have schools, you can have other retailers, as long as it's retail, because when it becomes private, after the condo developer's gone, the pots creep out, and the residents don't like it, and the public doesn't like it. And it basically, see nothing, it sterilizes that area so quickly if you're not careful. Also want to make sure we provide waterfront views. In Toronto, the buildings escalate back away from the water to provide more views for people, and so you avoid that high rise right at the water's edge, which is important. And we're doing some new things as well. We call them pilot programs. These are called WUNRFs, living streets. They're not main streets, but they're side streets, and what they are a pedestrianized surface with a very, very low rolling curb. And nobody has the right of way. So people drive, people walk, people bicycle, people skateboard, whatever. No signage, no one has the right of way, so everybody looks out for everybody else. And it's a Dutch concept which we're trialing. It's interesting, one of the things that is difficult in any big city is there are certain design standards that the city staff have that apply, but we found that if you call it a pilot, it's okay because it allows for failure. If you want to do it first and it becomes a precedent, that's a concern. But if it's a pilot, people know it may or may not work. So I found great use for the term pilot, great value in that. Because, I mean, if you're managing infrastructure for a city of 2.5 million people, or in this case, 1 million people, it's tough because, you got snake oil salesmen coming in all the time pitching different ideas. So this tends to work quite well. We also built, I think, Canada's third underpass park, or second, the largest one in Canada so far. And we took that space under the overpass, which is sort of the dead space, where it's, where the trolls live. Remember your fairy tales. And we turned it into a very well-lit community park as a connector between two neighborhoods, as opposed to leaving it being a desolate, dark, potentially dangerous area. And that's worked very, very well. Underpass Park. Also, we have done something different in our public art program. Most cities, and I'm not sure whether Ottawa has this or not, but in most cities, like New York or London, Toronto, developers have to commit a certain percentage of their hard cost towards public art. And this is apart from Section 37. This is a separate dedication. And what can happen is you get the tapestry in the back of the lobby or the little statue in the corner, and they spend the money, but it's really not that significant. So what we decided to do is, we can manage that, we can broker that. So let's basically get large, important commissions put in prominent public locations and be the broker, and then collect from the developers that 1% as they put their building permits in. So with the government help, we've become the middleman to make sure we have a high-value public art program, again, that costs the public nothing. And the developers don't mind because basically they're just cutting a check. And it's a task off their plate. And it's given us very, very significant art in a more meaningful way, which actually helps value as well. It helps add value to the neighborhood when you have that public art in prominent locations. We also have to create land for affordable housing. We have a mandate that 25% of the housing should be affordable, 5% ownership, 20% affordable rental. We haven't got the model to provide the capital for that, but we provide the land for that. And we're now been fortunate enough to have circumstances occur that allowed us to manage and maintain the 20%. This is a Toronto Community Housing Project, the very first one at River and King Street, and very well done. Something else we're doing is we have Canada's first open access ultra broadband network. Open access means anybody can go on. At home, I get Bell, and I get Bell telephony, Bell TV, Bell internet. With an open access network, it's an open pipe. Most of these systems around the world are municipally owned. In Canada and North America, the carriers compete on the hardware as well as the content, so it's not common. We put the first one in here. First was Chattanooga in North America. First in Canada is the waterfront. And we started off with 100 megabits per second, synchronous, same speed up and down, no data caps for $60 a month. And what we did is we basically had the carrier put in half the capital, and we carved out a fee from the developers per door for the other part. We gave the carriers a capital subsidy, and we gave the carrier a 10-year contract for each condo. So as part of the condo common cost, they have to pay $60 a month per unit to pay for the internet for a 10-year contract. And we said, because we're giving you effectively a monopoly, you cannot mine that. You have to keep within the top 7 of the world when it comes to price performance. So it started off at $60 a month for 100 megabits per second, and we've ratcheted up to 500. Now it's a gigabit per second for $60 a month. No data caps. You don't get that anywhere else in North America. And that's been very successful with a small carrier, Beanfield Metroconnect, who was doing commercial work in Toronto at the time. Something else we've done, though, is we've built in an internal cross-subsidy. So I carve out 120% from the developer for the market units, and I give the carrier 100% for every unit, including the affordable rental. We make sure that no one gets left behind. The divide is getting more challenging for our society, and the digital divide is getting worse. So we're trying to make sure that we're making sure everybody in the neighborhood, no matter where they live, has access to that high-speed broadband. So they don't get behind insofar as the economy. And that's working quite well. In fact, the carriers are now even discounting the operating cost to those units as well. And again, because we have that in the neighborhood, excuse me, we have a proposal that's gone out and been won for an innovation center, again, for tenants that actually want to use the broadband and actually collaborate. 20 years ago, it was unheard of. Everyone wanted to keep their distance. Today, a lot of high-tech companies want to collaborate, even with their suppliers and their competitors on different issues. So this particular project, again, is going to build on the fact that the pipe is there and the community is wired. So we're hoping to attract tenants who want to collaborate and also want to trial things at super high speeds. And if it works here, then they can export that product to Ontario, to Canada, and to the globe. And we're using this basically as a starting point to build an innovation corridor, again, to attract jobs back downtown in that sector. So we're putting in the framework and all the infrastructure to let that happen. So that kind of talks about how we've done things, so I'll do a quick run through of what we've done. So 24 newer improved parks. East Bayfront, the major precinct at the water's edge before. So this is Sugar Beach, or Sherburne Common right before. These are the arms where that stormwater comes down the metal screen into the biofilter. part of the public art. Sugar Beach, before and after, the infamous umbrellas. And what we've done is Chorus Key, 1,200 employees, high-tech employees in a vertically integrated broadcast company. George Brown, waterfronts, and you know this in Ottawa, waterfronts in the wintertime are pretty brutal. And one of the things we learned from Quebec City was if you want to make them animated all year round, bring students down. They got to be there in January and February. I know it sounds a bit Machiavellian, but it works. And so you have the retailers and the people are down there, and it's happening. You know, so again, it provides that liveliness. And condominiums, Moshe Safdie's designed Mondo, Bayside, East Bayfront. So in the West Don Lands, Underpass Park, before and after. Corktown Common, this is the berm I talked about, the flood protection landform, now a 17-acre community park. And in that, we have our community housing, River City, our first commercial project of residential, and the Pan Am Village. We were very successful in Toronto in securing the Pan Am Games in 2015, and we had a village ready to go in a sense. We had designs, plans approved, ready to go. So the village basically allowed us to build exactly what we told the community we were going to build, but we used it to house the coaches and the athletes during the games. Then it went out to the eventual end user. So it wasn't a case of building barracks and trying to figure out what to do with them afterwards. It was we built exactly what we told the community and we had planned for. And that's it, village there. So the Central Waterfront before, York Quay, Ontario Square, you can guess who funded that, Canada Square. Again, major public realm. And the big thing was to convert Queens Quay, as Jan spoke about, to from a 4-lane, mismanaged, ugly street, voted one of the 10 ugliest streets in the world by a spacing blog, to one of the most, I'll call it our new signature street in Toronto. So before and after. And again, our wave decks. So this is going to be our signature street. I mean, when you go to Barcelona, you walk the Ramblas. You go to Paris, you walk Champs-Élysées. When you come to Toronto as a tourist, you're going to walk Queens Quay. That's going to be our signature street. It's stunning. And there's a fly-through. Well, not finished yet. Just could run the fly-through. It's only, I think, 30 or 40 seconds. This is basically what we did before we built it, to show people what we like, and it actually is built just that way. The trees aren't as big yet, but this is exactly what got built. And we have to do some footbridges yet. But it was a 4-lane street, mismanaged. We actually reduced it to 2 lanes and took all the lanes to the right of the tram line and converted this Martin Goodman Trail and public realm, and to the left converted the 2 lanes to a 2-way street. Now, you wouldn't think that would be acceptable to the community, and it was a hard sell, going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. But we showed them through modeling that actually, by improving the street, we'd actually maintain its capacity and give them this beautiful environment. All right. So, from a government point of view, $1.5 billion is a lot of money. And what do they get for it? So we did a study in 2013 to quickly show what they got for it. At that time, we'd invested about $1.3 billion. And going back to the governments with $622 million of taxes. That's sales tax, income tax, indirect taxation, HST, and so forth. Most of it went to the federal government, some of the province, very little to the city, unfortunately. But that was what our public sector investment was, but it allowed the first 6 projects a commitment of $2.6 billion, and again, that's the start of the development. There'll be many more from that. So this is this is just a starting point. And that's another $838 million of tax revenue back. So between those two, you're up to the $1.3, $1.4 billion of revenue going back to governments. And of course, around us, because of what we had done, the focus, we had a lot of other development happening in the private sector, so another $9.6 billion is or was underway. So we can't take credit for that. But in some cases, we were the catalyst for it entirely. In some cases, we just helped our marketing. But that's what's happening around the waterfront when it became a focus of interest. So come a long way. And the next project for us is the Portlands, another 800 acres of flood risk area. We've been working on an environmental assessment for 10 years. This flood risk shows houses being flooded out if the Hurricane Hazel occurs. And the solution was to, rather than have one outlet for the water, to build 3 outlets. A new river, the existing channel to the north, and a new outlet to the south. And that basically relieves the flood risk. This shows you what the waterfront will look like in probably 15 years' time. I mean, it's a guess because we have the market to deal with, but it shows you what's been done so far. And this is sort of, it pans over to the east to show new development and the new Portlands area. And I think that's it. There's another video, but I think I've timed out. I'm getting the hook here. 2 minutes? Okay, we can show the last video. This is a fly down the river. And it's important in dealing with the public to show people these things because it's hard to visualize if you're not trained. So from here, there's the existing channel, and from here on in, here's the new riverbed. And this is a large project. This is about $1.5 billion by itself. But you can't expand the city downtown until you do this because of the flood risk. These fly-throughs are wonderful. They give people a real sense of what can be done. Okay. I think that's it. So thank you very much.
And now we're just going to open it for questions. So if anyone has any questions, we had Pat. I think my mic is off. And we've had Francine has been working hard, getting all the, do you need more cards? Maybe we can get Francine more cards. There's a lot of traffic on the webcast. So for the first question, is looking back, what would you say is the biggest accomplishment of the project?
I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the public engagement. I mean, we really went from an era, 15 years ago when the public really weren't that engaged. And I think what we've done is really set a new standard in Toronto for public engagement. That's what I think I'm really proud of. It's not our project; it's the project of the community, and that really has made a big difference. So it's one of those things. It's not physical, but it certainly has had a big impact, and I think one of the things I'm most proud of.
If you would have to do it all over again, what would you do differently?
I think when we started in 2001, I guess it was unofficially, excuse me, the government had created us. In a hurry to get us out, they didn't give us the powers of a corporation. We couldn't borrow money. We couldn't create subsidiaries, which all real estate companies need to do. So we really had very little power. And it took us until last year to get the power to borrow. And even just to borrow for operating cash, not to borrow $1 billion to go and invest. Basically just because as the grants run out, you end up then relying on sales. And sales revenue is very spiky. But your expenses aren't spiky. You've got to pay people every day. And so the powers to borrow, we should have basically held off and got more corporate powers. The other thing I think would be different would be to get land ownership as opposed to land stewardship. Right now, we own very little land, only land that we bought. Most of the land's owned by the province or the city. And so there's a fairly lengthy process. Once you pick a developer, we then have to go and basically deal with the Crown to make sure that land transfer occurs, and that can become, quite lengthy and arduous. And whether it's City Council or the Crown, it's another process that people can second guess. And so owning the land and having the powers of a corporation would be essential. My counterpart in Hamburg, Germany, has all that. He borrowed 3.5 billion euros, and he's probably 10 years ahead of us because he has had that oomph to do it. And he's supported by the city of Hamburg and the state of Hamburg, and time-wise, they're way ahead of us because of that. We've had to sort of muddle along, cap in hand.
Great, thank you. Next question. Remember, it's someone else asking. I don't quite I don't quite understand the distinction you made between revitalization and redevelopment. Isn't building new residents and offices and retail a big part of Toronto's new waterfront?
It is. It's a very important point. I'm glad that person raised it because I really want to reinforce that. I mean, real estate is real estate and it's redevelopment, But it's how you do it. It's basically ensuring the public realm is built there, making sure we're building broadband into the process and the planning process. All those things help shape a quality of life and quality of place, which is quite different from just peddling land and selling it to developers for residential. You know, making sure, for example, the ground floor is not residential. Those kinds of things. Making sure that people build for the future. Again, that's always a challenge. You know, you got to deal with tomorrow morning because the developer's got to sell this stuff. But you also want to think about what happens in 20 and 30 and 40 years' time. And that's not what they're going to think about. It's what we have to think about. So the revitalization is much more about being driven by public policy to ensure, in fact, you're building a quality of life here, that everybody wants to live here. They want to stay here. So and you don't get that just by peddling real estate. If you travel around and look at waterfronts around the world, you can see those that have sold real estate and those that have done the other, which has basically been mindful of the broader public policies.
Okay, thank you. The next question, condos versus waterfront views for all. How did you manage that?
A big challenge, because when we first started, I think every public meeting I went to, people say, we don't want a wall of condos, because there had been previously a developer had done some very high-rise, ugly stuff that basically had people concerned. What we've done really is, with the planners, is tiered stuff back away from the water. So 4 to 6 stories at water's edge, around 10 stories at the main street, Queens Quay, and back against the expressway, probably 30 stories or higher. So tiering it back and making sure that as you look down those streets, you know, you can see the water as well. So it's a blend of again, the hierarchy of buildings going back and making sure that you can see down and there's enough access down to the water.
Okay. Great. Another question along the same lines. Street level, give a few more examples of what the ground use was used instead of being for private.
Okay, schools. George Brown has got a ground floor, lobby, food court, and so forth. Bookstores. So, and again, there's the challenge is it all sounds great to have cafes there, but there's only so many cafes you can support. You know, if you've got a kilometer of waterfront, you're not going to have a kilometer of cafes. But restaurants, cafes, bookstores, retail, gyms, the community space of the condos, you know, their gyms and so forth. As long as it isn't something, it's not so much what's there, it's what's not there that's important. You don't want people with their lawn chairs out there moving their pots into the public realm, because that's what sterilizes the area. So it's really anything but residential, as opposed to it has to be this. It's really anything but private residential.
Okay, great, thank you. So just a little change of topic here. What types of engagement activities reach the largest audience? So how did you get the most folks out?
It's very interesting because, I mean, we went through community papers. We've tried to expand the reaches, and it's been tough because you get a certain percentage of the population who are very engaged in civic issues. It's tough to reach the immigrant population, and it's tough to reach young people. So we advertised in some of the immigrant local newspapers, and we pushed our social media extensively. So Facebook, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. We've done a lot of that to try to reach out and make sure that we can bring young people, and doing the same thing that's being done here tonight, which is basically, you know, broadcasting and having people participate in the public meeting through a social media table. And that gets more young people engaged. And it is a challenge, though, because it's the older folks that, like me, that basically are interested in this sort of thing that come out to the public meetings. So it's a challenge to get everybody else.
Great, thank you. What zoning requirements do you, sorry, have to remove my glasses. What zoning requirements did you specifically have to get to allow the exceptions? So did you have to get any different zoning requirements to allow for exceptions?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Was the zoning in place already, or did you have to get exceptions?
In fact, what happened is we basically did the precinct plan with the community and with the planning department, you know, sort of side by side, and then that goes into the city hall for a zoning bylaw. So the zoning is created as a result of the precinct planning. Before there was industrial use. So, you know, 1 times, 2 times.
Specifically asked was if you allow exceptions to that as Ottawa frequently does.
That's a very good question, a very thoughtful question, because we have the OMB. So sometimes it can be a bit of a crapshoot at the OMB. So when it's our land, public land, we're putting out to the marketplace, they're not even allowed to go and talk to the city without our permission. and we will let them go and ask for minor variations if the design calls for it. But they can't go with a 10-story building and say, I want 30 stories. Now, the challenge is, of the 15% of private land that's there, as private owners, they can go to the OMB. So the city passes a bylaw that says certain things, and we've been arguing for 3 years with some developers about what they want to do that's outside the zoning bylaw. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're pragmatic. The city hall don't have billions of dollars to spend on legal costs, so there can, in some cases, be the courthouse step settlement. Okay, you know, the zoning calls for 10, you want 20, we'll settle on 15. That does happen. That's the realism. So, but not much you can do about it. I mean, I think the legal cost for one of our arguments is up over $2 million to fight certain things that they want to do. So it's a challenge. We don't allow the exceptions where we control it, but where it's private sector, we have to negotiate because of the threat of the OMB.
Great, thank you. Another question, how important is the public realm to the success of the revitalization?
Absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. Let me repeat, absolutely essential. That's when you think about it, when you go to great cities, it's the public realm that makes you feel it's a great city. You walk around Paris, the buildings don't impress you. It's the public realm that you enjoy, the pedestrian aspect. And all great cities, I think, are really defined by their public realm, not by their buildings. I mean, look at Dubai. It's a great collection of real estate projects, but I would not call it a great city. There's very little public realm. So I think that's really critical to create that quality of place, is the quality of the public realm that people enjoy on the streets. Absolutely essential.
Great. Another question that's a little bit different. Are there any plans to incorporate urban farming?
We've talked about it, we've thought about it, but no, not a lot. I mean, there's garden plot areas in the city, but I think when you look at the smart growth strategy of the province and the greenbelt strategy around Toronto, you know, we have to intensify. The waterfront's at the top of the list. And so we're trying to find ways to intensify in a smart fashion. I mean, we can't keep building bungalows in Niagara Falls. That's not going to work. So it's how do we intensify in the waterfront and get great quality of life, but also get higher densities and higher intensity, because that's sustainable. Possibly, we are calling for what is it now? I think it's 40 or 50% of the rooftop area to be green. So there is some room for, I think it's intensive green roofs, which is, I think, the 18 inches, which allows for it in some cases. So, okay. But we're not mandating other than the green roof strategy.
Great, thank you. What will be the legacy of the redevelopment of Toronto's waterfront?
Well, I think the vision is that it will create a city that others aspire to live and work and stay there. I think that's the legacy, is to make sure that we're competitive. I travel around the world. I was in Melbourne or Adelaide in Australia a month ago, and you see what Melbourne and Singapore and others are doing. Everyone's doing this, and so we cannot not do it. I mean, if we standing still, we're falling behind. And so if we want our cities to thrive and we want to preserve the quality of life that we have, we've got to build great quality of place.
Okay, so last question. What are the plans for the gardener? Again, I just asked them.
We did a study, and the misconception is that the Gardner's an expressway. Actually, the piece that we were looking at is all called the link between two expressways. The Gardner comes in from the west, Don Valley comes in from the north. And most of the traffic comes into the city and back out. And only about 20% of the traffic uses that link. And that's why we decided we should look at that link to see what we could do. And our recommendation was to take it down. But that's a bigger question than the waterfront question. And so it went to City Council. And they decided they wanted to do a hybrid, which was move it and rebuild it and make it more attractive, free up some waterfront land. We didn't think that was necessary, but I don't live in the world of politics. I wasn't elected. And so the politicians decided that they wanted the hybrid.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. That ends this part of our Q&A. And thank you very much, Mr. Campbell, for a great answering of the questions and a fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.